Welcome to Coruzant Technologies, home of the Digital Executive Podcast.
Welcome to the Digital Executive. Today's guest is Andrew Einhorn. Andrew Einhorn is the Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Level Fields, an AI-driven fintech application that automates arduous investment research so investors can find opportunities faster and easier. His mission is to create AI tools that make advanced financial strategies effortless and accessible for all. With over 10 years of experience in building and leading technology and tech-enabled service firms, Andrew has a proven track record of delivering innovative solutions that solve real-world problems and generate value for customers and stakeholders. Well, good afternoon, Andrew. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Appreciate you making the time, Andrew, today. This is awesome. Love starting the day out with a podcast and jumping right into your first question, Andrew. What inspired you to start Level Fields, and how did your background in technology and tech-enabled services influence your vision for the company?
There's a long story and a short version. I'll start with the short version of that one. I had just sold my company, my previous company, which also did kind of event monitoring and analysis for publicly traded companies in 2019. Took a bit of a break, went on what my wife called a sabbatical. And then about 6 months later, kind of regrouped with the technical team. And we were thinking about how we could improve what we had done the previous 10 years, take it to the next level. We had seen kind of the limitations of Boolean searches and knew we needed to add an AI component. So we started building out an AI system that was much more advanced for linguistics processing. And as we were working on that, the pandemic hit. COVID happened. And the market started selling off like crazy. I started getting lots of calls from family members who were concerned about, losing their retirements forever, losing their college savings for their children. And there was this just deep fear in the marketplace that we were headed into a global depression. My background was in epidemiology before I got into technology development. And I had worked in public health for 10 years. So I had seen pandemics before. I'd actually worked at the CDC as a contractor during the swine flu pandemic. And I just decided to start doing some research and looked at all the past pandemics and how they affected markets. I looked at similarities that might exist between kind of the Zika epidemic that we saw and others, and looked at the government responses and locked myself in my office for about 80 hours to come up with the answer, which was markets will be right back to where they were in 6 months, and the government response will be swift, and we'll have a vaccine within 13 months. That was what I told people. They thought I was crazy when I said it, and I kind of dismissed it. But, lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. And it wasn't terribly surprising because that's what the data showed. And so all of that kind of showcased that events change everything. They changed the trajectory of the stock market. They changed the trajectory of a company's revenue or history. And once we had realized that, we saw, there's an opportunity here to make this kind of information available at the touch of a button. It shouldn't take 80 hours to do this kind of work. And the more we thought about it and kind of peeled back the onion, we saw, wow, there's so many events in the market. And then surrounding these events are just a lot of opinions. How can we weed through this noise, all these opinions and all these kind of influencers and pump and dumps that are happening in the marketplace, and really just focus on the core of what's moving financial markets and stocks, which was events. And so that was kind of the aha moment. And, then we just started thinking about what the user interface should look like. How do we make this as easy as possible so that it's like looking at a weather forecast, where you can see, hey, it looks like a hurricane's going to come, but it's not going to hit till Thursday. And when it does, it's a category 3. And this is how much damage it's going to be. We wanted to do the same thing with events, right? We wanted it to be just that easy, that straightforward. And the more we kind of leaned into that, the more we recognized there were great trading strategies and investing strategies that could be based solely off events. And you could look at one type of event that occurs again and again and again, a couple hundred times a year, and just invest or trade based on that event. You wouldn't have to know nearly as much on fundamental analysis or technical analysis. So the kind of barrier to entry was lower. And we felt like, hey, this is a really opportunity to kind of take what the largest most profitable, most successful hedge funds do by leveraging events, and democratize access to that so that any person can have the same level of insights and technology without having to work on Wall Street for 20 years. So that's where Level Fields was born.
Thank you, Andrew. That's a great story. And obviously we could learn a lot from the pandemic, especially a lot of research has come out after the fact now. And, people are really looking at really what happened, but I love the fact that you jumped in there and are leveraging AI and predictive modeling to forecast events and what's may happen in the market. So I appreciate that. And Andrew, Levelfield leverages AI to automate investment research. Can you explain how your platform works and the specific problems it solves for investors?
Sure. The short version is it's like a speed reader. So think of like an AI is a robot that reads really fast, so fast that it can go through 30,000 documents every minute. And it's looking through, millions of records that are out there in the stock market, news, company announcements, filings, things of that nature, some of which are really detailed reports, some of which are 1 page long. And all of those, they hold different pieces of information. We specifically look for events, things that happen. An announcement might be a product launch, could be a company that's returning capital to shareholders, it could be a CEO getting fired or getting hired. We look for those kind of events that are material to the share price, meaning they will move the stock price up or down, and we extract them. And so, if you ask a typical person, how many stocks can you name? They'll probably come up with 20, maybe 30. You get someone more experienced, they might be able to do 50. Few people will be able to list the 6,000 stocks that exist in the US stock market alone. And so that is the problem that we're solving for, is that a single human cannot monitor the market without the help of, hundreds of analysts like they have at big asset management shops. With our AI, you can actually do that. You can monitor and read through all these reports, looking for just the sort of information that you're interested in. So I can set an alert with Level Fields AI to go out and say, I'm really interested in tech companies that are medium sized, that have a PE ratio below 20, that just got a new CEO, because I think that those are good turnaround stories. And it just looks for that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Once it finds that particular match of the criteria, it will flag it, send you an alert, and give you information about the company. And so your research time goes from, 10, 20 hours a week to about 10 to 20 seconds. And you can do that for any, variety of different types of events, or you can just log onto the system and search and browse through an array of events that are happening to kind of get a sense of what's happening across the whole market, just as easily as you can go browse flights and find a flight that's going to a place that you're interested in. So we really try to think about the end user, and the problem that most people have is that they don't either have the time to do the research in the market, they don't have the knowledge to do the research in the market, or they simply just cannot keep up with the volume of information that's out there. So we aim to leverage the AI to solve those problems and make it really less burdensome to come up with different investing ideas, to come up with trade ideas, to keep tabs on, what are the kind of the emerging companies, hidden nuggets in the market that are having an odd, tailwind due to some macroeconomic factor. For example, when the war in Ukraine broke out, when Russia invaded Ukraine, we were getting these event alerts for lots of fertilizer and coal companies that were handing back tons of cash to shareholders. They were giving and raising dividends. They were doing stock buybacks. And it was just sort of odd when the rest of the market was selling off because 2022 was pretty bad. And so it forced us to sort of look and squint and say, what is going on with coal? What is going on with fertilizer? No idea. Well, because Russia had cut off natural gas, most of Europe had to switch to burning coal to produce power, which created more demand on coal, which drove the price of coal up. So if you're a coal company and you can now do nothing different but sell your product for 3 times the price, you're going to have a lot more money. And it was the same situation with fertilizer. A lot of it came out of Belarus and Ukraine and Russia. And because the Russian ships were basically in the ports, you couldn't get this material out. And so companies who were making and distributing fertilizer from Canada and the US could just sell their product for a lot more. And I would have never in a million years gone and actively searched for fertilizer companies. But because I saw these sort of special events that were happening, I had to pay attention to it, ended up investing in some of these and made a good amount of money, just by having the system kind of find these anomalies for me. So, those things are happening all the time in the market. We always have a lot of unique events, particularly, in the last 4 or 5 years. We have constant, macroeconomic events. We have, political turmoil, and we have global conflicts, and we have weather issues. There's no shortage of reasons that the markets are reacting. And the difficult thing, I think, for most people is to kind of put 2 and 2 together across all of these companies and understand the economy, at large, when there's 6,000 different participants in it, and, what's going to cause the price to go up and down. And that's what the system is doing automatically. So we're trying to really break down the barriers, make it easier, make it more visually appealing, take kind of an Apple approach to design. And we've seen, really good support for what we're doing. We're not perfect, but, we keep improving every week, and we're about to launch a whole new slew of really cool features. So I'm excited about it.
That's awesome. Thank you for that, Andrew. Obviously, the world is a volatile place. The last 3 to 4 years have been kind of a roller coaster ride, to be honest. So I appreciate you sharing that and sharing that fact that your technology can find those anomalies and help people make better investment decisions. So, Andrew, you designed the first AI event intelligence platform to forecast the impact of event on stock. Can you discuss the development process and any key challenges you face when developing the platform?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. So the first thing you have to start with is focusing on the problem at hand and not trying to do something that's too broad. A lot of sort of off-the-shelf AI systems are not particularly intelligent, right? They're kind of the starting point. They're a sketch when you need a painting. And so you still have to do a lot of work if you're trying to use something like that, because it's just general information. And so what we had to do was start from scratch and build our own library of terminology, of phrases that is specific to the finance sector, because they use different language. Even just understanding the way that they use language, earnings, adjusted earnings, diluted earnings, core EPS, the things that are unique to the sector. They had to build out a pretty massive ontology of terms and phrases. And that was kind of the starting point. And you have to look at, well, what is going to trip the system up, right? Because computers and AI, they're not particularly smart at the beginning. They're smart after many, 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 many times training it. And I often say, if you've ever trained a dog, it's very similar to training AI in that, you can train your dog to not pee in your house. But the second you take your dog to your friend's house, the first thing it does is pee in their house. And it's because the dog only learned over and over and over again, pee in your house. You never taught it, don't pee in any house. Training AI is the exact same way. You have to train it for every possible situation. You have to train it hundreds of times for it to learn. You can kind of skip some of that by having more focused rules and more focused, financial language. So that's a challenge in and of itself, just to get enough volume of data out there to process, to look at, to train, which takes time. And then you have to look at the things that trip up the system, where you have a bluebird that flies in the sky, and then you have a bluebird bio, which is a publicly traded stock. So how does the system differentiate between the two? You have to use context. You have to develop different algorithms for probability assessment of understanding, who is the speaker? What is the situation we're talking about? Are we talking about nature? Are we talking about finance and biology? And so you have to bring that context to life. You have to look at things like directionality. So if you're talking about 2 companies and one is buying a company who's buying who. And that can get, a little dicey because the company who's being bought might say, hey, we were purchased by Apple. And then Apple might say, we bought this other company. So you have to understand kind of who is doing what is doing the action. And it's a variety of rules like that in linguistics that you have to go through, apply, and then you watch to see how the system handles it, and you train it, and you correct, and you continually improve that cycle over and over and over again, tens of thousands of times. And so we did that, over the course of a couple of years. And so that is on the AI side of it. But then once you have that, that's great. But then you have, how is a human going to interact with the system? Right? I'm a user. We launched a beta version that we thought was really good. And it turns out from, the feedback that people just didn't understand what to do with the system. Wasn't obvious to them. They wanted to go and look for a stock that they knew. So they wanted to search. That's how they wanted to start the process. And we didn't want to look at it that way. We're like, why would you want to search for a stock? And we can give you all these other ones that are better that you've never heard of. But what we found was people had behaviors and they did not want to change those behaviors. It didn't matter that we were coming up with something completely new or new way of doing something. They needed to do what they normally do and just have a tool that kind of caters to their process rather than jump in and take our process. And that was a big lesson learned on this, is that, we couldn't completely change the process. We couldn't kind of reprogram the way that people behaved. So we had to sort of find different ways to introduce our concepts to a normal workflow that they were going through. And so we introduced a search feature. And then people would search for the stocks that they want. They'd find the stock that they want, and they could see the events that we would show that were happening to that company. And then they learned, I'll get it. Okay, this is different from just looking at, a news feed. This is an event, and this event has a forecast of, how these events usually play out. And it has, an event impact that's really interesting. And that allowed them to then understand the platform a bit better and begin to form kind of a rationale or a process for using it. So that, that discovery process that just went through in the user interface, that was like a 6-month time of learning, reworking it, going back to the drawing board, adding quickly some of the features that people expected, testing it, seeing if, it caused less anxiety for people and they could adopt it faster, which they did. And then we had to build it out and launch the next version. So it was interesting. And I have to say that within finance, unlike some of the other areas that I've worked in, people are often set in their ways, and very few people look at investing or trading the same way. Like, we've had thousands of users subscribe to the system, and we've talked to hundreds of them. I don't think any two people had the exact same process. I mean, one person says, I use options, and then they use calls. Another person sells puts, another person buys puts, and then another person does strangles and straddles, and another person only wants to make 1% a day. So they come in and out of the market. Then someone else wants to automate it. I mean, it's just an endless array of, this is how I do it, and this is the right way. So that was a challenge too, because we had to keep this platform so flexible that everybody could get what they wanted out of it without overloading it with features and making it feel intimidating. And I'd like to say that we completely solved that problem, but I don't think we have completely solved it. I think that we're still trying to find different ways to make the platform, let's say, certain features appear for different levels of users. And I'm working on that challenge, all the time. And I'd love to get feedback from users who can say, hey, I don't know how to use these filters. So maybe you could just give me like one easy button that I can push and the magic happens. So things like that, I think, are a little bit unique to this. And I think the last barrier I would say is that in this space, unfortunately, there has been a lot of scams. There has been a lot of false promises, false prophecies that, this company can figure out who the next Amazon is, and nobody can do that. But people fall for it. They put their money in, they lose their money. And so it's been a little bit of a challenge on the marketing side to say, hey, we understand that there's been kind of scammers out there and lots of opinions out there that say that they can help you become the next millionaire. we actually have a system that works and the data is shown right there on the system, that's been a bit of a barrier, for the selling process to say, look, we have something really interesting here that works. And there's a lot of skepticism around that. So, we do what we can on the lots of case studies and demos that we put on the website. But I think that's still going to be, an issue, I think, unfortunately, as people have a tendency to take advantage of other people. As sad as that is, it's just kind of the world we live in.
Thank you, Andrew. You've covered quite a bit there. Of course, the challenge you've had with creating a platform and how AI learns, right, through that long LLM process and needs specifics to do things right. But like I said, you covered quite a bit of ground there. And switching into the last question, Andrew, if you could briefly share, looking ahead, how do you envision the future of fintech and the role of AI in transforming investment strategies in financial services?
I think it's going to be bifurcated between enabling a person to do a lot much faster, the way that Level Fields works, where, one person can really now do the work of 100 people. I think that's going to be a big piece of it. And so you can take a system and just really streamline your research process, streamline your discovery process. I think that that's going to be, an interface like ChatGPT, I'm sure will be layered over financial data. So you can just kind of ask questions that are more specific and a little bit more timely. Like, hey, why was Apple up 7% yesterday, and get an answer very quickly and not have to poke around. And I think that will help. On the other side of it, and this has been going on for a while, I think asset managers are continuing to look for ways to automate the entire process of portfolio management, wealth management, and to look to AI as a means to sort of automatically balance portfolios, right? So that means if they're supposed to be 10% of the portfolio tech and the tech companies that they're invested in become 20%, then the AI will automatically sell off some of those assets to get the balance back to 10%. And there's some of that has existed for a while. So I think it'll just get more advanced in some of the things that it's looking for. And I think some of the top hedge funds are certainly going to try to find different ways to look at, using some of the momentum in the market to identify better stock picks over the long term based upon early indicators that AI can analyze in a very fashion, looking at multiple variables simultaneously to try to project, where a company's financials might be in a few years, or where a country's growth areas might be based upon looking at, other countries that had similar trajectories. So it's not dissimilar from what we're already doing. It's just more efficient. And the analogy I like to give is, once upon a time, if you were going to build a house, you had a hammer and some nails. Now you have a nail gun, and AI is pretty much a nail gun for any kind of thing that you're trying to accomplish. Doesn't mean that you're going to eliminate people altogether, although in some industries that might happen. For the most part, it's just more efficient. You can do a lot more faster. And I think for a country that is facing population growth problems like we are here, that's good news. It means we can continually enhance our productivity without enhancing our population size. So, and I'm excited to see what comes next. We're certainly trying to participate in this by having homegrown AI at Level Fields, and hopefully people find it as useful as we do.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that. And I always like to get, the guest perspective on the technology platform or whatever, technology they're actually working on or developing. And so I love your perspective on that. And I think AI has a lot of promise. We just need to make sure that we keep the ethics in check. Andrew, it was certainly a pleasure having you on today, and I look forward to speaking with you real soon.
Thanks, Brian. It was great being here. Appreciate the time.
Bye for now.